Good morning, everyone. It is Thursday, February the 4th, 2021. It is currently 10:54 a.m. Central Time, and I'm here at Victory Baptist Church, located in Ovalo, Texas. It's an empty building, and this building has been empty for a very long time. Because of COVID and because of the situation here in the local area with the hospitals being overwhelmed, we have not had in-person services. It feels like for almost a year. Now, we've had a few in-person services kind of placed in there when I felt like, okay, I think we can have an in-person service, but this is almost the way it's worked. Okay, we can have an in-person service. We have an in-person service, and then I get a phone call on Monday. Hey, just to let you know, someone in our family has tested positive for COVID. Okay, all right, no more in-person services. All right, we're going to have an in-person service. Hey, Pastor, just let you know that our family was just exposed to COVID. Okay, no more in-person services. So we... For a small church, we've had a lot of people either test positive or have been exposed to COVID, and it's been a crazy situation. But this building has remained empty week after week after week. Now, when I say the building has been empty from all of the church members being here. Of course, I have been here day in, day out. Day after day after day after day, sitting right here in front of this microphone, trying to do Bible study exercises, news commentary, sermons. I've hour after hour after hour. I think in 2020 alone, if I'd have to verify this, and I think I have the numbers relatively close. In 2020 alone, I produced well over 900 episodes of podcasts, sermons, etc. So even though the church was empty, that in no way, shape, or form slowed down, diminished the amount of teaching. In fact, it increased the amount of teaching, because on a Sunday, when people are here, then I show up, 15, 20 minutes early for Sunday school, and then I do the morning worship service. I go home, come back about 15, 20 minutes before the evening service, and then do the evening service and go home. Well, without anyone here, I'm showing up on Sunday mornings at around 6 a.m. and doing live broadcast all the way till afternoon. Go home for lunch, come back and do multiple hours of live broadcast in the afternoon. So I have done everything in my power that even though we've made the decision, and the way we make our decision is based on what's going on in the local hospitals. If they're over the 15% threshold for COVID patients, then we don't have in-person services. Currently, they have dropped below the 15%. They've stayed below that for more than 7 days. That's the criteria then I use. That's following, I think that's a good way to make that determination is the local hospitals, when they get over that threshold and they're like, look, this is detrimental to the community. This is detrimental to everyone. And I don't want my church being involved in any way, shape, or form at putting people's lives at risk or doing something that then increases the amount of people who have to go to the hospital, and then people cannot get, the medical care that they need. So that's the way we've made our decision, not based off what government is doing, but based off good, sound medical reason. And I've also listened to one of the people in my church who is a first responder, a fireman. And at one point he called and said, look, 80% of our calls are COVID related, right? This is not a good situation. And when you hear that, you're like, okay. And the other night I was listening to my police scanner, and it was like 6 calls, one after another, that were COVID related. And that just tells you, man, we've got to make good decisions. So right now, hospitals are in a good situation, good shape, or in good shape, relatively speaking, compared to how bad things were. Cases seem to be dropping. Recoveries are happening faster than new cases. So currently, we're in a good spot. So this Sunday, we're going to have in-person services for Sunday school and for Sunday morning. All right, actual people present. Now, we're not, Sunday night, we're going to just do live streaming, and Wednesday night, we're going to do live streaming. We'll give it about another week or two to see how things play out, and then we'll add a Sunday night. and then we'll do Sunday school, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and then we'll bring back Wednesday, and we'll get back to our normal schedule. That's the plan, but at any point we will change that based off what the local medical authority and the local medical officials are saying, and that's the way we're making our decision. But I say all of that for a reason. No one's been in this building, right? This building's been empty week after week after week after week after week after week after week. So guess what that means? I'm going to lean back. I know you can't see, but I'm leaning back, way back here. Right behind me is an offering plate. There's an offering plate. Now, we don't pass the offering plate in our church. We just leave them back here in the back table. And I always say something like, if you have an offering today, put it in the back. That's what I say. We don't pass it. In the offering plate right now is some change. This change has been here, and I'm not lying. This change has been in this basket probably for a year, maybe over a year, right? That's it. At some point, someone needs to do something with it, right? But so here it is. That's it. There's no money has been placed in this offering basket probably for almost a year. Probably none has been placed in it. Now, whenever that happens, that is concerning. I'm going to be the first to tell you, I get worried. Now, I have not asked anyone how we're doing financially. I've not asked. I don't have access to be able to look. I don't have a clue. I don't know how we're doing financially as a church. I don't know. I do know that many listeners to this podcast have sent checks and have supported us, and we are really appreciative of that. In many cases, the listeners to this podcast has basically funded the internet ministry. Basically, they've kept the internet ministry where it's not hurting the church in any way, shape, or form. Far as I know, the members of the church have been giving. I don't know what they're doing. They're sending the check to someone. They're doing it electronically. I don't have a clue. I haven't sent out emails saying, "Hey guys, make sure," I haven't done anything like that. I haven't tried to message people going, "Hey, make sure you're giving. Don't forget to give." So I don't know how we're doing. Hopefully we're doing okay. I'm thinking we're doing okay. I hope I would have heard something if we're not doing okay. I hope we're doing okay. But it is a little concerning because this is the way it works. I know nobody likes to talk about money within the church because it just seems so opposite to what the church is supposed to be about. But let's just remind ourselves of a couple of things. I'm sitting in a building. There are lights on. That costs money, right? That costs money to turn those lights on. In fact, sometimes our electric bill here is so crazy that I don't even understand how our electric bill can be so high, but it's always high. And then, of course, right behind me, you can't tell, is the thermostat control for the heat and for the air. That costs money. Right behind me, you can hear, that's the sound booth. Inside that sound booth is our modem for our internet. Well, guess what? That costs money because without that, I can't be live on the air, right? So that costs money. Wait, I'm live on the air right now. Right next to me is a laptop, and on this laptop is a software, Spreaker Studio software. Well, for me to be able to use the Spreaker Studio software and to get our program not only live on the air, but then distributed to all the podcast programs, that cost us around $100 a month. Then we have pod pages. They cost us around $15 a month. We have a website that cost us for hosting that. It's not really anything much a month. But if you just take the what it costs to use Spreaker, about $100 a month, the 2 pod pages, those are $15 a piece. We're on SoundCloud. I think that's another $15 a month. You just add all of that. You're getting close before you add it all up, and you start paying so much per month. It costs money. Well, when there's no one coming to church to put money in a basket, how are you going to pay the electric bill, right? How are you going to pay the internet? How are you going to pay for all of this? Now, again, a lot of our internet ministry has been taken care of just because listeners have been so thoughtful. But it is concerning. Now, I can't even imagine large churches where you have you have 10, 15 people on staff. Some of these churches, they got a communication director. They've got, they got people for everything. They got secretaries. It's just crazy all the people on their staff. They've got these huge churches with staff. Well, if no one's coming through that front door to give money, that gets concerning. right? Because how are you going to keep the doors open? Some of those churches, just their monthly payment on their building, I can't even comprehend. We don't have a monthly payment for our building because our building is paid for. So that's wonderful. That's great. We don't have that. We don't have that. That's wonderful. But so our expenses are not great. They're not great, but I mean, we still have expenses. Every church does. You've got salaries if the pastors get paid. You got all those staff members. You got the upkeep of the building. You got electricity, insurance, all the different things that you have going on. So if you don't have people walking through the door, putting money in an offering plate, then you get worried. You get worried that the giving will decrease, even if you make it available for people to give online, which most large churches have ways for people to give online. There's still got to be a concern that giving is going to decrease. I mean, and for some of these big churches, if it decreases 10% or 20%, that could be devastating for their overall budget. So I can understand the concern, but listen to what I'm about to say. When you have financial concerns, it sometimes can lead to making decisions not based off the scriptures, not based off the Bible, not based off a godly wisdom, not based off a spiritual mind, but you start making decisions based off those financial concerns. Financial concerns can quickly blind you to scripture and spiritual wisdom. In fact, in many cases, financial concerns can lead you to compromising the scriptures and compromising spiritual perspectives simply because of financial concerns. This is something I have stated from the very beginning of the pandemic, is that people are going to get worried about money. And when they get worried about money, their whole tone is going to change about the pandemic. They're going to be like, hey, this pandemic is serious. People are dying. People are getting sick. We need to make good decisions. Wait a minute. Our giving dropped 20%? Well, dun-da-dun-da-da. I don't think that pandemic is serious anymore. I think the whole thing is a hoax. Let's get everyone back in this building. We've got to get the giving back up. Or, hey, let's do a drive-in service. We're going to do a drive-in service because, we can't forsake the assembly. Is it really about not forsaking the assembly, or it's about getting everyone in that parking lot so that you can go car to car to car to get an offering? And I said that was one of my concerns. That's one of the things I said about the drive-in services that churches were doing. It made no sense to me. You're going to have everyone get out of their house, get in a car, and go sit in the parking lot in their car. And you either stand on a platform with speakers blaring and everyone rolls down their window to try to hear, or you broadcast it over an FM transmitter so they can listen on their car radio. In some cases, the pastors were inside the building while the people were sitting in the parking lot in their cars. It's ridiculous. Just live stream on the internet and let people listen at home. And you say, well, that's difficult to do. No, it's not. I am not that, I'm not that proficient in certain areas of technology, and I'm able to come out here to this little church in the middle of nowhere and hit one little button and go live on the internet. All right. So people can pull that off. You say, well, we need video. You use whatever you have is what you can do. But in many cases, people were creating these drive-in services, claiming they were doing it to make a point, right? That we're not forsaking the assembly. We're going to be together, and trying to say that it was all spiritual. But it just seemed interesting that in the videos I saw, you also saw people going door to door, car to car with a basket, getting what? Money, 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 money. Now, I understand. That's why I started with understanding the concerns, that it requires money to keep the church open. But if that concern blinds you to doing what is spiritual and what is right, or if that financial concern causes you to do things, to try to pretend that you're doing things for spiritual reasons when all you're really doing it is for financial reasons, then it's just leading to hypocrisy. I stated it before, and I'll state it again, that there was a pastor in Louisiana that got interviewed by CNN. And he was like, look, we're not going to follow the rules. We're going to have in-person services, and we don't care what anyone says. And he says, look, we're just like any other business. If we're not open, people don't give, and then we can't stay open. So he acknowledged the reason he was having in-person services was because of financial reasons. I disagreed, but I admired the honesty That honesty was refreshing, where somebody's like, no, we're going to have drive-in services because we're doing it for God, and we're doing it because we're going to defend our religious liberty. You're doing it to get money, right? You're doing it for financial reasons. Now, I'm not saying every church. There may have been churches that did drive-in services and didn't even ask for a dime, and no one gave any money. But I think you could accomplish the same thing without having people get in their car to sit in the parking lot. It just seems odd that would even an idea. But it's like churches wanted to make a point, but while making a point, they wanted to make some money. So I have been greatly concerned with all of that. And to add to that, what many churches did is, we've got to close down, but we're going to take money and we're going to get money from the federal government. Because the federal government had a plan, this PPP loan plan, the Paycheck Protection Program loan, and that if you could get money from the federal government, and if you did not lay off your employees or fire your employees, that basically then that loan could be forgiven, and basically you wouldn't have to pay it back. Or at least I don't know if it worked that way for every business, but I know for many churches that's the way it worked. Like you get the loan, but if you don't lay anyone off and you don't fire anyone and you keep paying them, then that loan can basically be forgiven. All right. So here's what happened. Churches started filing for and receiving PPP loans. Large amounts, crazy amounts. I've already stated it before. Me and my daughter spent one night looking at all the churches in our local area. I'm like, they received $1 million. They received $600,000. They received $300,000. I'm like, this is insane. How many churches around here took federal money to keep the churches open? Now, here's what's crazy. Not only did they take the money, then they defied the rules. They're like, we're going to take the money, but we're not going to shut down. Now, the reason you were given the money is because your business or your church could not be open. But they took the money and then stayed open, which to me is like so dishonest, so evil. They took the money and then still had people packing in. And I won't name the church in the local area, but we looked it up. We saw how much money they received, and they are one of the ones who make it very clear they're not following the rules. So that means the people are there giving money, but they took more money from the federal government. Well, obviously, you're not going to have to lay anyone off because you've got people giving. So guess what? You just made a nice $600,000, $700,000, $1 million on top of what you already have. That is so. And Christian churches did this. Now, I've stated it, and I will stand by it. If your church received PPP loans, you need to find another church. It's not the government's job to keep your church open. That's insane. That's crazy. And then listen, while the government is handed out, I think, over $7 billion in money, taxpayer money, federal funds to churches to help keep them over. While that was happening, Christians were running around going, we're being persecuted. They hate Jesus. They're trying to shut us down. They hate us. Oh, they're coming after us. Persecution is coming. The end is near. They hate Jesus. They hate Jesus. They don't want us to preach the gospel. Yeah, they gave you $7 billion to help you keep your doors open. Sounds like real persecution. It sounds horrific. I don't even know how as Christians we're going to be able to survive. I mean, the government is out to give me a break. You can't scream persecution when they're giving you money so that your church can stay open and you don't have to lay anyone off. You don't even have to feel any pain. No, you don't have to make any sacrifices. Now, I say all of that because we have another article in regards to this nonsense. Here we go. All right. Here's the headline. Sitting on billions. Catholic dioceses amassed taxpayer aid. So they had billions of dollars, but instead of, having to use those extra billions, they got some taxpayer money. Let's hear the story. When the coronavirus forced churches to close their doors and give up Sunday collections, The Roman Catholic Diocese of Charlotte turned to the federal government's signature small business relief program for more than $8 million. The diocese headquarters, churches and schools lended the help even though they had roughly $100 million of their own cash and short-term investment available last spring. So they had roughly $100 million available, but you know what? We'll take a little bit more money, because hey, don't ever waste the opportunity to get some more money. So they had $100 million available, but they took the money. It says when the cash catastrophe church leaders feared didn't materialize, those assets topped $110 million by the summer. I'm gratified to report the overall good financial health of the diocese, despite many difficulties presented by the COVID-19 pandemic. The bishop wrote in the diocese audited financial report released last fall. Yeah, I'm happy to report that everything's going great for us financially, because not only did we already have money, we got even more money. And we got that money from the federal government, that evil federal government who hates Jesus and wants to shut us all down. As the pandemic began to unfold, scores of Catholic dioceses across the U.S. received aid through the Paycheck Protection Program, sitting at the original report I had is that we received, there was around $7 billion. According to this is from the Associated Press. As the pandemic began to unfold, scores of Catholic dioceses across the U.S. received aid through the Paycheck Protection Program while sitting on well over $10 billion in cash. All right, so they were sitting on $10 billion in cash and then received more money. I thought they were getting ready to say the $10 billion was a part of that. No. So I think the total Paycheck Protection Program that went to religious institutions was over $7 billion. But they already had over $10 billion in cash. They had short-term investments or other available funds, an Associated Press investigation has found. And despite the broad economic downturn, these assets have grown in many dioceses. Yet even with that financial safety net, the 112 dioceses that shared their financial statements along with the churches and schools that they oversee collected at least $1.5 billion in taxpayer-backed aid. A majority of those dioceses reported enough money on hand to cover at least 6 months of operating expenses, even without any new income. So even without any new income, they could have went 6 months without one dime coming in, but they still got tax money. Says overall, the nation's nearly 200 dioceses where bishops and cardinals govern and other Catholic institutions received at least $3 billion. $3 billion is what the Catholic Church received. Yeah. And they go on and they give more information and more information and more information. And see, they did report that in some of the hardest hit churches, income dropped by 40% or more. So during the pandemic, while they were closing many churches, money dropped by 40%. So in some of those churches, now they had billions on hand, but they went ahead and got the taxpayer money. They went ahead and got the federal funds. But I want you to hear that. The giving dropped by 40%. Well, guess what? If the giving dropped by 40% in Catholic churches, how much did it drop in other churches? And if it dropped at all, do you think that could not be? And I keep stressing this over and over. Do you not think that could be part of the motivation for saying, we're not going to follow the guidelines? Now we're going to do it like it's us against them. This mean, evil government doesn't like the gospel and they want to shut us down. We preach it that way. That gets everyone all fired up. Oh, I'm going to church this Sunday. I'm going to prove a point because I love Jesus. You manipulate the people like it's us versus them. It's David versus Goliath. Goliath is the evil government. They're trying to shut down the preaching of the gospel. So we need to all show up to church and, of course, give. But we're going to do so because forsake not the assembly. We're going to prove a point. We love Jesus, and we're not going to let our religious liberties be taken away. You preach it that way. You get everyone motivated. Yeah. Well, in the meantime, you're taking money from the federal government. All right. Good question. Someone just asked me, why am I against getting PPP loans? All right, this is very, very good question. All right, I'm against churches getting PPP loans for a very simple reason. The church has it's never, nowhere in the New Testament is the church ever to be funded by the federal government. And listen, if you're funded by the government, then you cannot complain when the government wants to then add rules to what you can and cannot do. Look, we are to be funded. The church is not to be funded by Caesar. The church is to be funded by God's people. I don't think the church should raise money through selling things, through rummage sales, garage sales, car washes. I can't stand when churches like, hey, we need to send our kids to church camp this summer, so we're going to do a car wash. No, the people give. The people give in the church. They give and then send the kids to church camp if church camp is so important. If you have someone who wants to be a missionary, the church should support them and get them on the mission field without them having to do jump through 500 hoops to get the money. The church is not to be funded from the federal government. I strongly believe in the separation of church and state. Well, you're not separating church and state when the state is helping fund the church and keeping it open. The church wants to stay open, the people give. If the people can't give, you have to make sacrifices. If the people can't give, you may not be able to have a large staff. You may not be able to do certain things. I definitely know my church wasn't able to support me, and I went without a salary for 12 years, 13 years, 14 years? I don't even know how long it went. Didn't get a dime. Now, the only thing I take from my church now is they make my house payment. That's it. They allow me to put gasoline in my car for driving out here. But you have to do what is necessary. The church is to be supported by the giving of God's people, not the federal government. Once you get money from the government, then you can't complain about controls that come with it. If you want the money from the government, then you're going to possibly get the controls. The New Testament makes it clear. The church is supported by the giving of God's people. We don't even want money from the world. God's people supports God's work through their giving, and they should give, hopefully, not by being manipulated, not by telling some sad story to make everyone cry. They should do so willingly, with a right spirit, and there should be no manipulation, twisting arms to get them to give. There should be none of that in any way, shape, or form. It shouldn't happen. And so that's why when we don't even pass an offering plate in this church, we've set it in the back. If people give, they give, and if they don't, they don't. We don't have the money. We don't have the money. It's that simple. When the roof got ripped off our building, when the roof got because of a tornado, I made it very clear. If we have the money, we continue to repair. When we don't have the money, we stop. We're not going to do some weird fundraising. We're not going to do some begging. We're not going to do some selling. We're not going to do any of that. If we have the money, we continue to work. When we don't have the money, we stop. And ultimately, it took us 2 years, and we got the building put back together. Right? That's the way it works, through the giving of God's people. It's not the federal government's job. It's not taxpayers' job to support religion. It's not the taxpayer's job to keep my church open. It's not. No, separation, church from. If I don't want the state's control, I don't take their money. It's that simple. And I don't want them involved in the church. And it's just insane that churches took the money and then decided not to follow the rules while screaming and crying that they were being persecuted. And you can look on the government website. You can look up, there's a database, and you can look up the name of churches in your city, and you can see how much money they received. And then you can look and see if they followed the rules or didn't follow the rules. One of the big ones, Grace Community Church with John MacArthur, they received PPP money. Now, they did send it back. But why would they apply for it even in the first place? And then MacArthur's went out there saying that we're being persecuted and they're trying to shut us down. You received money from the federal government. That's not them trying to shut you down. That was them trying to ensure that you could stay open and not have to lay off one person on your staff. It's just, to me, it's so disingenuous to scream persecution when the federal government handed out over $7 billion to religious institutions. Taxpayers, their money given to keep churches open. Churches want to be open, the people give. If the people don't give, the church closes. Now, I understand it requires money. I understand that. I wish it didn't. That's the one thing I wish ministries did not have to do. And that's one thing I've always promised I wasn't going to do, is that I wasn't going to sit here and stand in front of my people. And you're very welcome. Hopefully that answered the question. I know it was more of a rant than an answer. Okay. I know that I didn't really necessarily maybe explain it. I would tell you to do this. Go through the New Testament. You can look in 1 Corinthians. And how does Paul tell the church to do? On the first day of the week? That's when you take the collection. So, we don't pass an offering plate, but if we did pass an offering plate, I would only do it on Sundays. I would never do it on a Wednesday, because it's the first day of the week. That's when the early church took the collection. That's how it's to be done, supported through the giving of God's people. That's it. It's the church. It's the bride of Christ. Those who are part of the church, they should support it. I hope I made that clear. We shouldn't get money from anyone else. I don't want, if I passed an offering plate, I've always said this, if I passed an offering plate, we don't, but if we passed an offering plate and visitors were present, I would just make it very clear that the giving, we're asking, when we pass the offering plate, it's for members to give. If you're not a member, please don't feel any obligation to give. And, we're not asking you to give a dime, because it's for the members of the church to support the church. That's where it first comes from. Now, yes, we have people who are not members of this church who listen, who have sent us money. They do so on their own. I don't ask. I'm always grateful. But it's got to be God's people that support God's work. That's the way I think it should be structured. It's just crazy that the Catholic Church had billions of dollars and $10 billion and that they could have used. And instead of having to go into their funds, what they had in savings, we'll use that terminology, they go and get more money from the federal government. And in many cases, what's crazy, and more research and more investigation needs to be done to this, some of these Catholic dioceses that receive this federal money, guess what? These are dioceses where they've had serious numbers of children abused by priests, and they're paying off millions of dollars to settle these cases out of court. So while they're settling abuse cases out of court, they're getting more money from the federal government. Hey, our diocese, we just paid off $10 million to settle all of these abuse claims by people who were molested by priests. In the meantime, we took in $3 million from the federal government through the PPP loan. That right there is just... that is horrific. That is horrific. So I'll try to summarize this broadcast. There's other things I would rather talk about today, but this to me has just been one of the big things that we have discovered. One of the big things that we have discovered during the pandemic is simply how money, and I don't want to say the love of money. I don't want to accuse anyone for the love of money. I don't want to accuse anyone of being greedy or love for money. Here's what I will state. I think what we have seen is that financial concerns has gotten in the way of biblical wisdom and biblical perspective. And make it very clear, I understand that. I have stated it time and time again. I want to make it very clear. I am not claiming that I've got it all figured out, because I've always been in a position where I had an advantage over other pastors. All right. Let me explain. If you're a pastor and that church is your primary source of income, that's how you support your family. That's how you pay your mortgage. That's how you pay your car. That's how you take care of your kids. You take care of your family. You can't, if you lose that job, you lose your income, right? So it's pastors who depend on their churches for all of their income, it puts them in a very vulnerable situation. Like if things go wrong and people stop giving, or people leave the church, they're at great risk financially. So that puts you in a position of compromise, because you're like, oh, I don't know if I should preach it that way. I don't know if I should say it that way, because I could offend people and they could leave the church. I've always felt bad for pastors in that position. I've always been in the position. I was, bivocational for 12, 13 years. I was in the military. Military took care of me. The church didn't give me a dime. So that gave me the ability to stand behind the pulpit and say whatever I think needed to be said, no matter who I offended, no matter who got mad and left. I didn't have to worry about financial concerns. I've always said that I was able to do that not because I was more spiritual than anyone, just I had more security than other ones. So I didn't have the financial concern. So therefore that financial concern did not get in the way of being able to preach or say what I felt needed to be said from the pulpit. Other pastors there's that financial concern can lead to not quite saying what needs to be said the way it needs to be said because of those financial concerns. Well, then COVID came along. All right. Again, because of my military retirement and because of everything that happened with anthrax and my receiving the VA disability, I do need the church to make my house payment. Without them making my house payment, I possibly would have to get a job, another job, which if I ever have to do, I'll have to do that. But I wasn't still super concerned. I still wasn't super concerned financially. I didn't have that weight. But if you were a pastor of a large church where, man, if we lose 20% of our giving because of COVID, we're going to have to lay people off. We're going to be in trouble. We're not going to be able to pay the payment, the mortgage payment on the building or whatever the case may be. I can understand then that concern saying, you know what? I think we need to have in-person services. I think we need to have drive-in church services. But I understand that concern. So I have no problem with saying, hey, we're going to have to do this, but just state the reason why you're doing it. Hey, the reason we're doing this is because of financial concerns. Just be honest. You don't have to dress it up as, the big, bad, evil, new world order is coming for us and they're going to shut us down. So we need to show up at church to prove a point. We need to show up to church to defend religious liberty. Sometimes just be honest with what you're doing. If you're doing it for financial reasons, just acknowledge it. The problem is those financial concerns, it can begin to blind you and you feel like you're doing the right thing for the right reason because you're not willing to acknowledge the financial concern. Clearly, churches out there compromised with the PPP loans, and I think many of them compromised placing other people before them, other people's health, other people's safety, trying to help out their local health officials that are saying, hey, our hospitals are overwhelmed, please help us out. Not listening to anybody and holding in-person services simply because of financial concerns, but you manipulated the people thinking that they were fighting the good fight. The only fight they were fighting was the fight for your financial concerns. That is, to me, troubling. Now, some may have done it purely for good motives, and praise God for those who tried to. I may disagree with their decision and how they handled COVID, but if they did it for good motives, then praise God. If you're trying to do it for scriptural reasons, then I at least understand that. We may disagree, but I can understand that. If you disguised the financial concern through spiritual language, then that I don't support. And when you are taking money from the federal government to keep your doors open, I completely disagree with that. That goes against everything Scripture teaches. So PPP loans in your local church, that would be the end for me. That'd be the end for me. I would go somewhere else. And I know saying that is going to offend some people, but you don't have to listen to me. I'm just offering my opinion. Obviously, I have no control or authority over you, and I'm not trying to manipulate you. I'll just state it right there. I'm opposed to that. And I think, and I was shocked how many churches in the local area here took money from the federal government and then didn't follow the rules and then claimed that they were trying to be persecuted. In many cases, they kept those PPP loans very quiet. They weren't very vocal publicly about it, but when you can go to the government website and look it up, then you can be like, well, yeah, you're not being persecuted. You received $600,000 from the federal government. I don't think that's persecution. I don't think that's how Rome handled the early Christians. Hey, guys, why are you hiding in the catacombs? Here's a loan from the Roman government so that you can go build a church. They didn't do that. If they would have done that, it would have been a trap. Okay, here, we're going to give you money so you can build your building. And while you're building your building, we'll come get you and take you to the Coliseum and feed you to the lions. Yeah, that's different. It's just the narrative that got created amongst Christians during COVID was a narrative that was very short of reality in many aspects. But there we have it. Another news story, Catholic Church. Let me just summarize it, and then we'll end this one. I just had to talk about this because this thing has been driving me crazy. During the whole pandemic, this thing has been driving me crazy. Let me go back to the news story. Here we go. Sitting on billions of dollars, the Catholic diocese amassed taxpayer aid. And let me make it clear, when the world sees that, trust me, they're not happy about it. When the world sees that, if you think for a second the world is happy about churches receiving all of that money, millions of dollars, billions of dollars, what the Catholic Church, how much was it? Again, I can't remember total. Give me 1 second. My app here is crashing. Yeah, here we go. Let me go back to it. It's opening. Here we go. Let me find the actual. Yeah, overall, the nation's nearly 200 dioceses where bishops and cardinals govern and other Catholic institutions received $3 billion. Catholic Church received $3 billion from taxpayers in the middle of a pandemic. So to be trying, and you just, that does not make the world respect the church. That doesn't make the world look at the church saying, man, they didn't take, they gave. They definitely are not, they seem to put other things before money. No, their attitude just looks like money-hungry people taking money from the federal government to stay open, and then they run around screaming they're being persecuted. It turns the world against us. And I've always said the world is going to be against us. Let them be against us for biblical reasons. Let's not let them be against us because of foolishness and other things that we engage in. And I think that's the lesson. All right, I'll stop right there, and I'll be back on the air here shortly with some other important content. Thanks for listening. For those who disagree, trust me, if you disagree, you're in the majority. There's plenty of churches out there that took PPP loans, and you can go support them, and you can be happy there. I completely understand that. So you no need to get mad at me. For those who do agree with me, you're in the minority, okay? Well, great. Ultimately, to me, it's a biblical issue. All right, I'll stop right there. Everyone have a great day. God bless.